Welcome to the Coven Chat.
Thank you for joining me here at the Maiden Circle Coven Chat podcast, where we talk all things witchy, spiritual, and human.
Merry meet and welcome to another episode of the Coven Chat. Thank you so much for being here. In today's episode, we are talking pendulums. Pendulums are a swinging little tool used for divination, timekeeping, and much more. And we will talk all about pendulums in today's episode, but first, a poem. So, generally, when I do these episodes, I don't come up with a title for it until after it's already recorded. Sometimes I might have something in mind before actually doing this part, but quite often I will do the episode based on an idea, a specific topic, and then afterwards just toss on some sort of maybe catchy, maybe not title, a title that I think just sounds right. For this episode, I already came up with the title as I was doing my research. In coming up with this episode's title, my mind went on a bit of a tangent, and it went from how the pendulum swings to the title of an episode of American Dad, for whom the sleigh bell tolls. I don't know why, I think they just have a similar sort of cadence to me. And then I thought, that actually is the title of a poem, minus the sleigh. It's For Whom the Bell Tolls. Now that American Dad episode is all about Evil Santa. It's one of my favorite episodes. The poem isn't as eventful, but still pretty good. So I'm going to share it with you today. This poem, For Whom the Bell Tolls, is by the poet John Donne, who lived from 1572 to 1631. He was a British poet. He served as the Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, but despite that, his poetry is known for being very saucy. This one, not so saucy. Instead, I find it a bit inspiring, and it's something to take apart and think about. It's a very short poem, but it says a lot. So, without even more ado, this is For Whom the Bell Tolls by John Donne. No man is an island entire of itself. Each is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thine own or of thine friends were. Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore send not to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. And that's it. Again, very short. For me, the way I read it is, it says something that I and many other people in this spiritual realm tend to say, is that we are all one. We're all connected. If you heard, I heard. It reminds me of one of my favorite animes, Jigoku Shoujo, an anime about vengeance. I mean, obviously it's about many more things, but vengeance is a main theme. And in that show, something that will never leave me is the saying, if you dig one grave, another is made. If you take a life, you have forfeit your own. If you doom one soul to hell, then your soul will also go. Because we are all connected, and if I cut you, I bleed, essentially. If I hurt another person, then I am hurting humanity. As a part of humanity, I am hurting myself. And the same goes for everyone else. You hurt someone, you're also hurting yourself in some way. So instead of asking who's going to suffer, who's going to hurt because of something, we all know the answer. If one hurts, we all hurt. And I could get into that topic a lot deeper, but that's not really what this episode is about. I could go much deeper into this topic, but of course that's not what this episode is about. I will just say that if you look around, it's very clear that people who do things that harm humanity, I could go much deeper into this topic, but of course that's not what this episode is about. If this is something you'd like me to touch on in a later episode, as usual, I implore you to write to me. Until then, let's go ahead and jump into our fun fact of the day.
Pagan fun fact. Here's your fun facts now.
Do you like music? I'm a huge fan, as anyone who knows me could probably tell you. Going a day without music has a huge effect on my mood, on my energy, probably on my outlook on life altogether. Where I find that music is all over the place. I listen to Spotify, obviously. I used to be a huge fan of Pandora back in the day, and I'm constantly looking up lyric videos on YouTube. Lyric videos are really cool for me because reading the lyrics helps me to internalize what I'm actually hearing. When it comes to genre, there's really no limit for me. It's pretty much dependent on my mood, my vibes at the time. I might have a week where I'm really into hard rock and roll. I might have a week where I'm super into 90s R&B, modern R&B, a week where I listen to a lot of hip hop, a week where I listen to a lot of disco or music from Motown or the 50s, etc., etc. In the summer, country is my big thing. And even if I've heard a song 1,000 times, I'm still likely to look up a lyric video if that's where I'm listening to music. If I'm on YouTube, then I'm probably looking up the lyric videos as opposed to the actual videos. Thanks to that, the algorithm gods saw fit to present a song to me this week called Hi Brazil by Alison Russell. Alison Russell is a Canadian musician and activist with a soul-trembling voice. So when I first heard this song, I heard her voice, and I also heard a beautiful clarinet solo both at the beginning and especially at the end. And my heart stopped. I was enthralled, taken in by this beautiful song, this beautiful voice. This very spiritual experience kind of overcame me as the song was playing, and I played it on loop quite a few times. I just couldn't stop listening to it. I couldn't stop bathing in this song. So of course, I needed to know more. It only took a quick Google of the title to find out where it came from. Hi Brazil. Not to be confused with the South American country of Brazil, High Brazil is an island off the coast of Ireland, or at least that's what some believe. High Brazil, like Avalon, is a mythical island said to only appear during specific times. With Avalon, it's when the priestess calls it forth. With High Brazil, it is simply said to appear every 7 years. Maps that trace back to the early 1600s have been shown with High Brazil right off the coast of Ireland, but there have been many expeditions to find it, and none have. Unless, of course, you believe the story of a Captain Nesbitt. According to mythicalireland.com, Captain Nesbitt found the island and landed on it, and partially explored it. But of course, in the centuries since then, there has been no evidence that it truly exists. And as far as what I can gather from the way the article is written, this account of Captain Nesbitt came from a third party who received correspondence, but Captain Nesbitt never returned. Some even believed that High Brazil was the location of a fountain of youth or some other source of eternal youth. Many sailors and adventurers sought glory through the pursuit of High Brazil. This isn't the only island that is said to disappear and reappear mysteriously, and it's not even the only island off the coast of Ireland to have such a legend, but it is still one of the longest running legends. According to the same website, Roderick O'Flaherty, a historian who was alive during the 17th century, said that the island was often visible in his time, and he wrote many things about it. It's of course inspired plenty of poems, and the website shared one by Gerald Griffin, which describes High Brazil as a shadowy land that men thought of as a region of sunshine and rest. The poem states that it looked like an Eden, as in Garden of Eden, as in paradise, and High Brazil, along with places like Avalon, have often been considered a type of paradise, a type of heaven, a place we go after we've passed on through our normal human life. Perhaps every 7 years, High Brazil opens up to welcome all the souls of that region, all the lives which ended during that interval. Like many of the witchy folk in my generation, I was deeply obsessed with The Mists of Avalon, a novel by Marion Zimmer Bradley, which kind of twists the tale of King Arthur and the women in his life. It is one of the few books I've read on multiple occasions, and I've seen the movie at least 50 times, if not more. It is still one of my favorites, and if you haven't seen it or read the book, I definitely recommend that you do. Learning about High Brazil has reawakened a fascination in me for magical places and magical beings. In my youth, I was pretty obsessed with my own Irish heritage. It's something I found out very young and confirmed in my 20s with a couple of those DNA tests. And I was always so interested in Celtic magic. It's one of the places where I started on this journey. So learning about this Irish island and hearing this beautiful song has reawakened that side of me, that love for Celtic myth and for my own Irish heritage. I love every aspect of my heritage, but that is not one I was able to be exposed to very often. So it's always been a place of curiosity for me. Anyway, that's your fun fact. I do hope you listen to that song, read that book, watch that movie, and if you're in Ireland, keep your eyes out for High Brazil. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Let's move on to this episode's musing. So pendulums. What the heck are they? Where do they come from? How do we use them? Let's talk about it. So let's start with the what. In simple terms, a pendulum is an object that is suspended from a fixed point that allows it to swing using the force of gravity. The first known recording of a pendulum and how pendulums work comes from the Italian scientist Galileo, who noticed the consistency of a pendulum swing after comparing it to his own pulse. This was somewhere around the late 1500s. Then, nearly 70 years later, a Dutch mathematician and scientist, Christian Huygens, invented a clock using a pendulum. The basic standard pendulum tends to be whatever the object is on the end of a string. There are also other kinds of pendulums, compound pendulums, which tend to be made up of sturdier materials like metal bars. One of my favorite tarot readers on YouTube actually uses a metal compound pendulum that is essentially a base, a metal bar extending up and another one extending out, and then the pendulum itself is on a bar and there's like some sort of hinge mechanism that allows it to move freely and eventually, because of the weight of it, land on an answer on the base, which has words on it like yes, no, maybe, etc. There are a few different types of pendulums, and I recommend you look into them if you're interested. This information came from botanica.com. We in the witchy community know it as a lot more than simply something that is used to keep time. We have so many uses for pendulums, and they've been used for so long that I would not be able to cover all of them in this episode. One of the ways I grew up seeing pendulums, even before I came to paganism, was what I would consider maybe an old wives' tale when I was growing up in Mississippi. Whenever someone was pregnant, they'd use a pendulum to see if they were going to have a boy or a girl. And even if you weren't pregnant, kids where I grew up would still hold the pendulum over their hand to see if one day they would have one or the other. This method of using a pendulum is still very popular today. The most common method that I know of using a pendulum these days is to answer questions, usually yes or no questions. But when I first started getting into pendulums, there was a lot of talk about checking your chakras, seeing if they're open or closed, if your chakras are balanced or unbalanced. And there were a few different ways I remember being used to check my chakras. One of the ways is to use a chart. It's either a colored chart or a chart with symbols of the chakras, and the instructions were to hold the pendulum over each chakra or each representation of the chakra, and depending on the direction it moved, that tells you if that chakra is in balance, if it's too open, if it's not open enough, if it's not open at all. And so I did that quite a bit when I was first starting out learning pendulums, because I was also doing a lot of work with chakra balancing. I was doing tons of chakra meditations. I was doing guided meditations. I still do a lot of chakra meditations, especially if I'm going to be reading tarot. I still do a chakra opening visualization And a lot of that started with using my pendulum to see if my chakras were in balance in the first place. Another method of chakra checking is to have someone else do it, and someone else will hold the pendulum over your body where your chakras are known to be located, where that energy is. Everything else is pretty much the same, depending on the direction of the pendulum. That's how you know whether it's open, closed, or whatever. Pendulums can also be used to gauge the energy in a space, to test for whether the energy is negative or positive, whether there are entities around. It can be used alongside other types of divination like Ouija boards and tarot cards. It can even be used to locate something missing. Years ago, there was a show that you probably have heard of called Charmed. There is a show called Charmed now that is a similar premise, but I'm speaking of the older one. And in that show, there was an episode where they lost all of their active fantasy powers, the power to freeze time and move things with your mind. They lost those, but they still were in touch with their Wiccan and witchy side. So they did the kind of witchy things that we still do. They used natural herbs. They used things that were physically available to them. And one of the things that I remember them doing is using a pendulum to locate something or someone within a space. And they would use a map and hold the pendulum over the map, and wherever the pendulum led them is where they would follow for the clue. I don't remember the exact details because it has been literal years since I watched that show. I used to watch it all the time. The new one came out and I've actually watched that quite a few times. There was some drama, and so I just haven't gone back to the original show. Plus, I did watch it frequently when I was younger, so I guess I just kind of needed a break. But it's always stuck with me how the pendulum was used in those episodes, and many practitioners still use pendulums in a similar way today in real life. Pendulums can be used in hundreds of different ways. The website askyourpendulum.com lists a few, so I'll link that in the show notes. But their list is in no way exhaustive. However you choose to use yours, regular practice with a pendulum will enhance your intuition. Just like regular practice with tarot or any other divination methods, you're getting in touch with your intuition, which means you're going to have an easier time navigating life overall. A stronger intuition means you're more sure about the path you're taking, and so the decisions you make are more concrete, and you have a lot more control over your destiny, over the direction your life takes. AskYourPendulum.com offers a good set of guidelines for how to use your pendulum when you're just starting out. The first step, as with most divination methods, is of course to make sure your mind is ready. Make sure you're not overly distracted, overly stressed out. It's best to get into a meditative or trance state, and of course your environment can help with that, so make sure you have a peaceful environment that's good for doing this kind of work. The next step is to get into position. You want to be upright or straight if you're holding your pendulum on a string or chain. You want to make sure you are stable and still. You want to have your arm on a stable surface. You can rest your elbow or your forearm on a table or your leg if your legs are steady, just on anything that'll keep it steady, but your hand should be, free. Hold the pendulum between your pointer and your thumb generally. I actually tend to have the string sort of looped over my middle finger while holding the end of it between my finger and my thumb, just for a little added stability. If you're asking a yes or no question, it's important to program your pendulum. This is inputting the answers in your pendulum. So if you are saying, when I get a yes answer, I want you to move back and forth or forward and back like a head nod. If the answer is no, I'd like you to move left and right like you're shaking your head. If the answer is unclear, I'd like you to move in a circle anti-clockwise. If you're giving me further confirmation for an answer you've already given, I'd like you to move in a circle clockwise. Or if you don't know, move again in that anti-clockwise circle or diagonal. I used to use diagonals a lot. I don't as much because I tend to get a little confused as to whether it's moving diagonally or in a circle, unless the motion is very wide. The next suggestion is to verify the answers that you've programmed. So you'd start off asking questions you already know the answer to, like, is my name Victoria? And if the pendulum shows yes, cool. You can say, is my birthday in March? And if the pendulum says no and your birthday is not in March, cool. If it says no and your birthday is in March, then you know that it needs some cleansing and added programming. The next step is to program the source of those answers. So just as I do with tarot readings, which I have cut out of the episodes now, but I still do it every single time. And if you go back to our first few episodes, you'll know what I'm talking about. You're going to want to be clear about where the answers are coming from. So for when I'm doing tarot reading and when I'm doing any other divination, I will ask my higher self. I will ask the Divine Mother and Father, God and Goddess. I will ask our angels, our ancestors, our spiritual guides, the higher selves of our living loved ones, and our passed on loved ones, and any beings or deities out there who want the absolute best for whoever is receiving the message. So you're going to want to be very clear about where the answers are coming from. Then, of course, you ask your question, and you wait for the answer, and you wait patiently. It may take a minute, it may take a few minutes. If it's taking longer than a few minutes, you may need to go back and reprogram it, or you may just not be able to get an answer at that time. And when you are done, clear your pendulum by touching it to your hand or the surface that you're reading to show that you are done with that question. You're going to want to do this between every question just to clear the slate. And when you are done with the session entirely, you're going to want to cleanse it. You can do this using smoke, you can do this putting it in the sun, putting it under the light of the full moon, burying it in salt depending on what it's made of, wiping it down with soap and water, whatever works for you and whatever won't damage the pendulum, of course, you can use to cleanse it after your divination session. Be patient and gentle with yourself. I would suggest always saying thank you to whoever it is that is giving you guidance, whoever it is you've called upon. Whichever way it swings, pendulums are pretty cool. I have been fascinated with pendulums for quite a few years now. I made my own using yarn and a ring from my grandmother after she passed, and I had used that one for many years until I finally went and bought one that is supposed to be made of clear quartz. However, I'm not 100% sure it's actual quartz and not just plastic. That doesn't really matter. What matters is the intention and the energy put into the object. Like, it can be a ring, it can be this plastic thing, it can be a pendulum made of crystal. Those may have a better result because crystals are natural objects and they tend to have a natural vibration within them, especially clear quartz. It has a vibration of its own that is often used in clocks. So if you use clear quartz, which is used in clocks, and use pendulums, which are used in clocks, you may have a stronger result than if you're just using a random object. But that's really subjective. And I would say that whatever you have, whatever you use, as long as you trust in yourself and trust in the source and keep yourself open and put that energy into it, then it's probably going to work just fine for you. Mine have. So that's all I have to say about pendulums today. I do hope that this was informative and that you learned something. Go out, get yourself a pendulum if you don't already have one, or make yourself one, and just play around with it. Have some fun. They're fun little tools. It doesn't have to be super serious. You can ask light questions and just play around with it, because either way, it's going to boost your intuition. So what do you have to lose? Again, I do hope you enjoyed this. And I also want to say, hopefully you did not hear too much background noise in today's episode, but if you did, I apologize. I live in the middle of a city, and sometimes it gets quite noisy right outside of my apartment. I do try to wait out the noise as much as possible, but it ends up taking me hours. I mean, hours. It can take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours to record a full episode because of the noise outside of my apartment, because I end up having to pause the recording and just wait it out. Sometimes the traffic is nonstop, even late at night, even at like 3 in the morning, there could be traffic that's super loud, people honking their horns because no one's patient in New York. And I hope in every episode that it's not a distraction. But in some of the episodes when I've listened back, I've heard it or I've heard other background noises. And so I just want to apologize and I thank you for sticking with me through it. Someday we will have space where all we hear are the birds and the wind through the trees and the purring of the cats. Maybe a dog barking. So that's all I have to say. Let's move on to this episode's divination. In today's reading, I will be doing things a little differently. We're going to pull a few cards from the Soul Healing Oracle, and then I will give you the opportunity to think of a yes or no question, and we'll use our pendulum to see the answer. But first, let's pull a few cards. We have I See You, number 41, Soulmates, Partnership, Mutual Understanding. We have number 26, Dark Night of the Soul, Loss, Heartache, Despair. We have number 32, Thank You, Gratitude, Appreciation for what is, Taking nothing for granted. And on the bottom of the deck, we have number 43, Through the Depths, Overcoming Hardships, Difficult Achievements, Success against the Odds. So for numbers, we have 41, which is 5, 26, which is 8, 32, which is 5, and 43, which is 7. When I was first looking at this, my brain decided not to do math, and I saw 26 as 7. So the number I first saw was 5757. We have instead 5857, but if you're into angel numbers, I would look into 5757 because that came up for a reason. We also have a few 5s, so this is about change, this is about growth, and this is about new luck and blessings, just from the numbers. But from the cards themselves, it feels like someone outside of you, or you may be dealing with someone who has brought you through a dark night of the soul, and you're feeling very grateful to them. Or it's vice versa, where they're feeling so grateful to you because you brought them through the depths. Maybe it was your energy, maybe you said something to them, maybe you're their partner or their soulmate, or you've just been very understanding and thoughtful to them. But they're so grateful to you. They went through something dark and heavy. Again, take it how it resonates. It could be that you went through something and they were good for you, vice versa. But one of you went through something very dark, very heavy, very unpleasant, and the other was there as a support, was offering love, offering kindness, offering understanding, and just being there as a loving force in the other's life. And now we have this energy of great gratitude of I made it through the depths. I made it through this horrible experience, through this darkness, and I am so happy and so thankful. I appreciate what I have. I appreciate my life now, and I refuse to take this connection for granted, because I do think this is about the connection between the two of you. They also may just be not taking life for granted anymore. Maybe they were, just sort of going through the motions, and now because of this connection, because they were pulled out of this darkness, out of this drowning feeling, the feeling that they were overwhelmed, the feeling that they were being defeated or lost, or they were experiencing loss. Now their head's above water. Now they're breathing a lot better. And they're just so grateful that they're never going to take anything for granted again. They're never going to take you for granted again. I think that is such a wonderful message for you. I'm not going to pull any clarifiers because it seems very clear. There's a connection here, and one or both of you even, but at least one of you, has found so much healing in this connection. You've become, or they've become, so much lighter from this connection. This is a healing and maybe even life-saving connection here. And that's beautiful. I wish you the best. I wish them the best. I think it's only going to continue. Now they're in the shallow end. They're no longer underwater. They're no longer in the depths. So now they're thankful and they're moving forward. Again, it could be you. But if you're in a connection and you're thinking about someone in particular, that's who this is. It's someone who has really found support in you. Or you found support in them, or you found support in each other. I didn't pull any clarifiers, but I did pull one more card just to see if there's anything else you needed to know. And we have 53, the Chalice, Womanhood, Intuition, Goddess Energy. And that's another 8. Also another 3 because we had 43, 32, and now 53. The bottom of the deck is now number 14, the Soul Needs Solitude, Quietness, Separation, Stepping Away. So with these two cards, it just feels like after all the terrible things, it's now time to rest, to let your intuition guide you here, and to step away from whatever it was that was causing the the darkness, whatever it was that was causing the pain. Step away from dwelling on it, from focusing on it, because now there's healing. Now is the time for healing, which is what the woman energy is. It's nurturing, it's healing, goddess energy. It's all about coming through the storm and empowering yourself. So that's where we're moving to. So that's your message from the cards. Now is the time for you to think of a yes or no question, say it out loud if you're able to, and hold that question in your heart while opening yourself up to your higher self and to deity. I am going to ask the same source as I do with the cards. So again, that is our higher selves, that is the divine, and that is our spiritual and physical guides, any of those beings out there who want only and absolutely the best for all of us. So go ahead and get your question ready. I am going to program my source, program my pendulum, and then tell you the answer. Feel free to pause the episode while you come up with a question. I'm going to go ahead and hold the pendulum now. Okay, it looks like the pendulum is swinging no. So no is the answer to your question. I do hope that answer helped you in some way. I hope it brought you some clarity, some confirmation. Hopefully it was a positive no, like you're asking, is my Uncle Ted robbing me? You want the answer to be no. So hopefully it was something that you're happy with. But our answer today with the pendulum is no. If you like this pendulum and you'd like me to continue using it in our readings, let me know. I just might do it either way because it has been a while since I used my pendulum regularly, and I really enjoy using the things that I have instead of just having them sit around and be pretty. So let me know what you thought of this episode. Let me know what you thought of this reading, if it resonates. And if you're using pendulums, feel free to write me, message me on the internet. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. Send me pictures of your pendulums. Please don't take that pervertedly, but send me pictures of your actual spiritual pendulums. I will share them on my platforms. So thank you again. I so appreciate your time. I so appreciate sharing this with you. I had a great time. And again, I just have to remind you to check out the song Hi Brazil. The link to that is in the show notes, in the description, wherever you're watching this. It is such a gorgeous song. I'm going to go listen to it right now as soon as I'm done recording this. I've already listened to it 4 times today since starting this episode. Because sometimes if there's a lot of noise going on outside and I know it's going to be for a long time, I'm going to listen to a song. So you go check that out. You get yourself a pendulum, and I will speak to you next time. Until then, I send you all the love in my soul and in my heart and all the blessings that the universe has to offer. Bye now.